What if the loudest protest isn't a chant in the street, but a quiet message hidden in plain sight? What if a name can vanish from search results, yet still travel across continents, carried by symbols, small gestures, and the stubborn courage of ordinary people? Tonight, we're looking at a story that's no longer just about one public figure. It's about how memory survives, how communities adapt, and why, when silence is enforced, creativity often becomes the most powerful voice of all. Stay with me, because the details are more surprising, more human, and more revealing than you might expect. The moment that unsettled the public was not defined by shock alone, but by a quiet sense of imbalance. Tragic news by its nature demands time to grieve, time to understand, and time to reflect. Yet in this case, many observers felt that the transition from loss to closure happened too swiftly, almost mechanically. The emotional rhythm felt disrupted. For a large segment of the audience, especially those accustomed to watching public narratives unfold over weeks or months, this rapid conclusion raised a subtle but persistent question. Was enough space given for truth to surface naturally? This question did not emerge from hostility or suspicion alone, but from a human instinct to seek coherence between event, investigation, and explanation. Importantly, doubt here did not take the form of accusation. Instead, it appeared as unease, an awareness that the story seemed to leap ahead of itself. When grief is still raw, certainty can feel premature. For many viewers, the absence of visible process mattered more than the outcome itself. This is often how long-running public discussions begin, not with outrage, but with a pause in which people quietly recognize that something does not align with their expectations of transparency, care, and proportion. And once that pause exists, it rarely disappears on its own. Entertainment management agencies operate in a delicate space where reputation, trust, and commercial stability intersect. When an unexpected crisis arises, particularly one involving a public figure, agencies are immediately placed under multiple layers of pressure, some visible, others entirely behind the scenes. From one direction comes public emotion, grief, confusion, and a demand for reassurance. From another comes institutional responsibility, protecting ongoing projects, contractual obligations, and professional relationships. Between these forces, silence can appear to be the safest short-term strategy. Yet silence is rarely neutral. For agencies, every public reaction carries potential consequences. A statement issued too early may be perceived as insensitive. A delayed response may be interpreted as avoidance. In such conditions, restraint is often chosen not because there's nothing to say, but because every word feels risky. However, audiences today are highly attuned to these dynamics. When communication feels overly controlled or excessively cautious, viewers may begin to question the motivation behind it. This does not mean they assume wrongdoing, but rather that they sense a defensive posture. The pressure, then, is not only about the event itself, but about narrative control. Agencies must manage not just facts, but perceptions, and that task becomes increasingly difficult when the public senses that emotional realities are being managed rather than acknowledged. In digital spaces, silence is rarely empty. When direct discussion becomes limited, attention does not disappear. It changes form. This phenomenon can be described as a silence economy, where absence itself becomes meaningful. Viewers quickly notice when topics become harder to find, when conversations lose continuity, or when familiar pathways of discussion quietly dissolve. For many, this creates a heightened sensitivity to what remains unsaid. Silence in this context is not perceived as calm. It is perceived as intentional. As a result, audiences adapt. They learn to read between lines, to recognize patterns, and to communicate indirectly. language becomes symbolic rather than explicit, meaning shifts from statements to hints, from declarations to shared understanding. This adaptation is not inherently confrontational. In many cases, it is simply a way to preserve emotional connection in constrained environments. People continue to express concern, remembrance, and solidarity, but they do so carefully, often prioritizing subtlety over volume. The silence economy thrives on collective awareness. Its strength lies not in amplification, but in recognition. When thousands understand a message that appears invisible to outsiders, a new form of community emerges, one built on attentiveness rather than noise. When direct expression becomes difficult, remembrance does not vanish, it evolves. What emerges is a quieter, more thoughtful language, shaped by creativity rather than confrontation. This new language avoids slogans and avoids spectacle. Instead, it relies on shared symbols, gentle metaphors, and coordinated moments of reflection. These expressions are intentionally non-disruptive, yet emotionally resonant. They allow individuals to honor memory without escalating tension. One of the most striking aspects of this approach is its restraint. There's no demand for attention, no insistence on being heard. The power lies in consistency. Small acts, repeated over time, begin to carry collective weight. Such practices also reflect maturity. They acknowledge limitations without surrendering meaning. By focusing on remembrance rather than accusation, participants maintain moral clarity while reducing the risk of misinterpretation. In many ways, this language mirrors traditional forms of mourning. Candles, anniversaries, shared silence, translated into a digital age. It reminds viewers that remembrance does not require permission, only intention. This is why these actions often feel dignified rather than defiant. They demonstrate that even under constraint, human expression can remain thoughtful, humane, and quietly resilient. For audiences aged 35 to 75, the emotional resonance of this story often runs deeper than immediate reaction. This generation has lived through shifting media landscapes, public reversals, and moments when official narratives were later re-examined with greater context. As a result, many viewers in this age group approach such stories with patience rather than urgency. They are less interested in instant conclusions and more attentive to long-term implications. Questions such as trust, accountability, and institutional behavior carry personal weight. This demographic also tends to value proportionality. They understand that not every uncertainty signals wrongdoing, but they also recognize when processes feel incomplete. Their response is often reflective rather than reactive. Additionally, this age group has a strong connection to memory, personal, cultural, and historical. The idea that a life or story could be reduced too quickly feels unsettling, regardless of fame. It touches on universal concerns about dignity and closure. For these viewers, the story is not consumed as entertainment. It is processed as a reminder that public narratives shape collective memory and that memory deserves care. If you value calm, thoughtful updates that focus on the human side of major stories without crossing the line into harmful speculation, please subscribe to Update X24 per Age. Thank you for watching and for choosing empathy over outrage. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.